The small town of Maplewood was quiet that morning, blanketed by a thick layer of gray clouds that seemed to mirror the mood of its residents. It wasn't just any day. It was the day everyone had been dreading for weeks. Grandpa Harold's funeral was happening, and the entire town had come out to pay their respects. The streets leading to St. Mary's Church were lined with cars, and people walked in groups toward the familiar white steepled building where Harold had attended service every Sunday without fail. Inside the church, the air felt heavy but warm, filled with memories of laughter, kindness, and love. Harold had lived a long life, 92 years, and he'd left behind not just his family but an entire community that adored him. His grandchildren, Emma, Jack, and Lily, sat together in the front pew, holding hands tightly as if trying to keep themselves grounded. They were still struggling to believe that their grandpa, the man who could light up any room with his booming laugh, was truly gone. Harold had always been larger than life. He was the kind of person who made everyone feel special, whether it was through his stories, his jokes, or even the little wooden toys he carved for the neighborhood kids. Emma remembered how he used to sit on the porch swing, whittling away at blocks of wood while telling her tales about his own childhood. Jack often teased him about being the original DIY guy, referring to the treehouse Harold had built in the backyard, a structure so sturdy and spacious that it became the site of countless family gatherings. And Lily? She loved how Harold would sneak her extra cookies during dinner, winking conspiratorially as if they shared a secret no one else knew. But today, there was no laughter. Only silence, broken occasionally by the soft sobs of those sitting near the front. The priest stood at the pulpit, speaking gently about Harold's life, the joys, the challenges, and the legacy he left behind. Friends and relatives took turns, sharing their favorite memories. One woman talked about how Harold had helped her fix her leaky roof when she first moved to town. A neighbor recounted the time Harold organized a block party simply because he thought the street needed more camaraderie. Each story painted a picture of a man who gave endlessly, loved deeply, and lived fully. As the service neared its end, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The priest paused before delivering what seemed like an unusual announcement. "Before we proceed to the gravesite," he began, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity, "Harold left specific instructions regarding his final moments with us. He requested that his coffin be opened one last time before burial." A ripple of murmurs spread through the congregation. Opening a coffin after the service? It wasn't something anyone had ever heard of, let alone expected. Some exchanged puzzled glances. Others leaned forward in their seats, intrigued. Even the funeral director looked surprised, glancing down at his clipboard as if double-checking the details. For Emma, Jack, and Lily, this added another layer of mystery to an already emotional day. Their minds raced with questions. Why would Grandpa want such a thing? What could possibly be inside the coffin that required everyone to see? Grandma Margaret, seated quietly beside her grandchildren, offered no explanation. Instead, she wore a faint smile, almost as if she knew something the rest of them didn't. When Emma leaned over to ask her about it, Grandma simply patted her hand and said, "You'll understand soon enough, sweetheart." The uncertainty lingered as the pallbearers carefully carried the polished mahogany casket out of the church and into the waiting hearse. Outside, the sky remained overcast, casting a dim light over the procession. People filed out slowly, some stopping briefly to hug the grieving family members, others whispering theories about Harold's peculiar request. By the time the group reached the cemetery, anticipation hung thick in the air. Everyone gathered around the grave, forming a tight circle as the coffin was placed on a stand beneath a canopy. The funeral director approached cautiously, his expression unreadable. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at the family for reassurance. Then, with deliberate care, he unlatched the lid of the coffin and began to lift it open. No one spoke. All eyes were fixed on the casket, waiting to see what lay inside. Whatever it was clear that Harold had one last surprise planned, a final act designed to leave a lasting impression on the people he loved most. As the lid of the coffin began to creak open, a collective hush fell over the crowd. The air seemed heavier now, charged with anticipation and an unspoken curiosity. Everyone leaned forward slightly, their eyes fixed on the gleaming mahogany casket as if it held some long-buried secret. Even the wind seemed to pause, holding its breath along with the mourners gathered around the grave. The funeral director moved slowly, his hand steady but deliberate, as though he too was unsure of what awaited them inside. Emma, Jack, and Lily stood closest to the coffin, their hearts pounding in unison. They exchanged nervous glances, silently wondering if they were ready for whatever Grandpa Harold had planned. After all, this wasn't just any man, it was Harold, the same grandfather who once turned an ordinary backyard into a magical wonderland with his treehouse masterpiece. If anyone could pull off something extraordinary, even in death, it was him. When the lid was finally lifted, the first thing that struck everyone was how different the interior looked. Instead of the traditional satin lining or floral arrangements, typically placed alongside the deceased, Harold's coffin was filled with intricate wooden carvings. Each side of the casket told a story, scenes from Harold's life etched meticulously into the wood. There was the small farmhouse where he grew up, complete with tiny details like chickens scratching in the yard and smoke curling from the chimney. Another panel depicted his wedding day, showing Harold standing beside Grandma Margaret under a cascade of flowers. And then there were playful moments captured forever. Harold teaching Emma how to ride a bike, helping Jack build a birdhouse, and chasing Lily around the garden with a water hose. The craftsmanship was breathtaking. It was clear that Harold himself must have worked on these carvings during his final days, pouring his heart and soul into creating a visual memoir of his life. But what truly caught everyone's attention and sent a ripple of shock through the crowd wasn't just the carvings. Resting gently on Harold's chest was a small wooden box, no larger than a shoebox, intricately engraved with swirling patterns and delicate filigree. At the center of the lid were 3 words carved in bold letters: "Open me when you're ready." A murmur swept through the gathering, low at first but growing louder as people tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Some whispered theories about hidden treasures or sentimental keepsakes, while others speculated that Harold might have left behind a final message for his family. Whatever it was, the presence of the box added an air of mystery to an already emotional day. Emma felt her pulse quicken as she stared at the box. She couldn't shake the feeling that her grandfather was still speaking to them, guiding them through this moment even though he was no longer physically present. Her siblings shared similar expressions of awe and confusion. Jack scratched the back of his neck nervously, muttering under his breath, "What do you think is inside?" Lily clutched Emma's arm tightly, her wide eyes reflecting both excitement and apprehension. Grandma Margaret, standing quietly nearby, watched the scene unfold with a knowing smile. When Emma glanced at her for answers, Grandma simply nodded encouragingly, as if to say, "Trust your grandfather." That subtle gesture gave Emma the courage to step forward. Taking a deep breath, she reached out and carefully picked up the box, cradling it in her hands as though it were made of glass. The weight of it surprised her. It was heavier than she'd expected, suggesting that whatever lay inside was substantial. "Should we open it now?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His question hung in the air, unanswered for a moment as everyone considered the implications. Opening the box here, at the gravesite, felt almost sacrilegious. Yet leaving it unopened seemed impossible. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Grandma Margaret stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. "Your grandpa always believed in doing things his own way," she said softly, addressing not just Emma but the entire family. "If he wanted us to open it, then we should honor his wishes." With that, Emma tightened her grip on the box and slowly traced her fingers over the engraving. The swirls and patterns felt smooth beneath her touch, each curve a testament to Harold's skill and dedication. Her siblings gathered closer, forming a protective circle around her as she prepared to pry open the lid. The crowd remained silent, their gazes fixed intently on the unfolding drama. The latch clicked softly as Emma eased it open, revealing what lay inside. Nestled within the box was a rolled-up piece of parchment, tied neatly with a red ribbon. The paper looked old, yellowed with age and fragile enough to crumble at the slightest touch. Carefully, Emma untied the ribbon and unfurled the parchment, smoothing it out so everyone could see. What greeted them was a hand-drawn map, marked with familiar landmarks from around Maplewood. Roads, rivers, and forests were sketched in meticulous detail, along with notes written in Harold's unmistakable handwriting. At the very center of the map was a large X, accompanied by the label, Grandpa's Secret. For a moment no one spoke. The silence stretched taut, broken only by the rustling of leaves overhead. Then, like a spark igniting dry kindling, whispers erupted throughout the crowd. People pointed at the map, discussing possible locations, and speculating about what Harold might have hidden. Was it treasure? A letter? Something else entirely? The questions swirled endlessly, fueling the growing sense of intrigue. Emma looked at her siblings, her mind racing. This was classic Harold, a man who thrived on surprises and loved nothing more than bringing people together. Whatever Grandpa's secret was, it was clear that finding it would require cooperation, patience, and perhaps a bit of adventure. For the first time that day, a flicker of excitement replaced the heaviness in her chest. Maybe this wasn't just about saying goodbye to Harold. It was also about celebrating everything he stood for: creativity, connection, and the joy of discovery. As the family stood there, clutching the map and staring at the mysterious X, they realized that Harold's legacy wasn't confined to memories or stories. He had given them one last puzzle to solve, one final chapter in the book of his extraordinary life. And though none of them knew exactly what awaited them, one thing was certain. Wherever the map led, they would face it together, as a family. The discovery of the map sent a wave of energy through the crowd, breaking the somber atmosphere that had lingered since the start of the funeral. Whispers turned into animated conversations as people speculated about what Grandpa's secret could be. Some joked that Harold might have buried a chest full of gold coins, while others suggested it could be something sentimental, a collection of photographs, letters, or mementos from his life. No one knew for sure, but the mystery was enough to spark excitement and curiosity in everyone present. Emma, Jack, and Lily stood at the center of it all, clutching the map tightly as if afraid someone might snatch it away. The three siblings exchanged glances, their faces reflecting a mix of confusion, anticipation, and determination. This wasn't just any puzzle. It was their grandfather's final gift to them, and they felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility to see it through. Grandma Margaret, who had been quietly observing the scene, finally stepped forward. Her voice, calm and steady, cut through the chatter. "Harold always loved a good adventure," she said with a faint smile. "If he left you this map, then it's meant to be followed. Don't let fear or doubt stop you from uncovering what he wanted to share." Her words resonated deeply with the family. Emma nodded slowly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "We should do it tonight," she suggested, her tone firm despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "While everything is still fresh in our minds, and before anyone changes their mind." Jack raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "Tonight? Are you sure? It's already getting late and we don't even know where this X leads." "It doesn't matter," Emma replied, her voice filled with conviction. "Grandpa wouldn't have gone through all this trouble if he didn't want us to find it. Besides, isn't this exactly the kind of thing he'd expect us to do?" Lily chimed in, her eyes wide with excitement. "I'm in. I mean, how often do you get to go on a real treasure hunt? Plus, it'll be fun. We can bring flashlights and snacks like a camping trip." The idea seemed absurd yet thrilling. A treasure hunt in memory of Grandpa Harold? It was so perfectly him that none of them could resist. After a quick discussion, the siblings agreed to meet back at Harold's house later that evening to prepare. They would need supplies, flashlights, sturdy shoes, jackets in case it got cold, and maybe even a shovel if they ended up digging. But more importantly, they needed each other. This was something they had to do together, as a team. As the crowd began to disperse after the graveside service, friends and neighbors offered words of encouragement. "Good luck, kids," one woman called out. "Let us know if you find anything exciting." Another man patted Jack on the shoulder and said, "Your grandpa was one of a kind. Whatever he left behind, I'm sure it's something worth finding." The time the siblings returned to Harold's house, dusk had settled over Maplewood, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. The old house, nestled at the edge of town, looked exactly as it always had, warm and inviting with its creaky, wooden floors and shelves lined with books and tools. Stepping inside felt bittersweet. Every corner of the home was infused with memories of Harold, from the smell of sawdust lingering in the workshop to the faint hum of the record player he used to tinker with. After gathering their supplies, the trio spread the map out on the dining table, studying it carefully under the soft glow of the overhead light. The landmarks were unmistakable: the winding river that ran along the outskirts of town, the towering oak tree near the park, and the old stone bridge Harold used to fish under. The X marked a spot deep in the woods behind his property, a secluded area none of them had ventured into in years. "This has to be it," Emma said, pointing to the map. "It's not far from here. We can walk there in about 20 minutes. Or less if we hurry," Jack added with a grin, trying to lighten the mood. Despite his earlier hesitation, he couldn't deny the thrill of the unknown. "Come on, let's grab the flashlights and head out before it gets too dark." They bundled up against the chilly night air and set off toward the woods, the map tucked safely inside Emma's backpack. The journey began quietly, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. As they walked, memories of Harold flooded their thoughts. Emma recalled how he used to tell her stories about the forest, claiming it was enchanted and full of secrets waiting to be discovered. Jack remembered the countless times Harold had taught him how to identify different types of trees and plants, and Lily thought about the picnics they'd had in the clearing, where Harold would play his harmonica and make up silly songs just to make her laugh. When they reached the edge of the woods, the path became narrower and darker, forcing them to rely on their flashlights to navigate. The beam of light danced ahead of them, illuminating twisted roots and fallen branches scattered across the ground. Despite the eerie atmosphere, there was something comforting about being surrounded by nature. It felt like Harold was guiding them, leading them closer to whatever secret he had hidden. After several minutes of walking, they arrived at the location marked on the map. It was a small clearing overgrown with bushes and thick layers of leaves. At first glance, there didn't seem to be anything unusual about the spot. But then Emma noticed something glinting faintly in the moonlight. A piece of metal sticking out of the ground. "There," she exclaimed, rushing forward. "Look, it's part of a handle or maybe a latch." Jack and Lily hurried to join her, their flashlights converging on the object. Sure enough, it was the corner of a weathered metal chest, partially buried, beneath years of dirt and debris. Their hearts raced as they knelt down to examine it. The chest was old, its surface rusted and scratched, but it appeared intact. Whoever, or whatever, was inside had been protected all these years. Without hesitation, the three of them began clearing away the leaves and soil, working together until the entire lid of the chest was exposed. It took some effort, but eventually, they managed to pry it open, revealing its contents. Inside, they found a smaller wooden box wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. Beneath it were bundles of letters tied with string, stacks of faded photographs, and various trinkets that clearly held personal significance. Emma carefully unwrapped the wooden box and opened it, revealing a stack of handwritten notes addressed to each member of the family. There was one for Grandma Margaret, one for Emma, Jack, and Lily, and even ones for distant relatives who hadn't been able to attend the funeral. Each letter bore Harold's familiar handwriting and was sealed with wax, stamped with a tiny star, a symbol he often used when signing his name. But there was something else in the chest, a single key resting atop the pile of treasures. It was small and tarnished, with the word Emma engraved on its bow. Emma picked it up, turning it over in her hands as questions swirled in her mind. What did it unlock? Where was it meant to lead? As they sat there in the clearing, surrounded by the remnants of Harold's legacy, the siblings felt a profound sense of connection, not just to their grandfather, but to each other. This wasn't just a treasure hunt. It was a journey into the heart of who Harold was and the values he cherished most. Adventure, creativity, love, and family. That was what he had left behind, not just in the chest, but in every moment they had shared with him. And though they still didn't know where the key would take them next, one thing was certain. Harold's spirit was alive and well, guiding them forward into the next chapter of his extraordinary story. The discovery of the key engraved with Emma's name sent a ripple of excitement and curiosity through the siblings as they made their way back to Harold's house. The night air was crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and damp earth. From the forest, their flashlights bobbed along the path, casting long shadows that danced across the trees. Each step felt heavier now, not because of exhaustion, but because of the weight of what they had uncovered. They were no longer just mourners paying respects to their grandfather. They were adventurers on a mission, piecing together the final puzzle he had left behind. As they walked, Emma clutched the key tightly in her hand, turning it over and over in her palm. It was small, tarnished, and unassuming, yet it seemed to hold infinite possibilities. "What do you think it unlocks?" Lily asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost reverent, as though speaking too loudly might disturb the magic of the moment. Jack shrugged, his usual skepticism tempered by the events of the evening. "Could be anything, a box, a drawer, maybe even a door. Knowing Grandpa, it's probably something weird like a hidden compartment in the floorboards." Emma didn't respond immediately. She was lost in thought, her mind racing through memories of Harold's home. There were so many places the key could fit: the workshop, the attic, the old roll-top desk in the living room. But deep down, she suspected it belonged somewhere special, somewhere Harold would have considered sacred. When they finally reached the house, the warm glow of the porch light greeted them like an old friend. Stepping inside felt surreal, as if the walls themselves were alive with Harold's presence. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the flickering lamps, seemed to whisper his name. The siblings gathered around the dining table once more, laying out the contents of the chest they'd found in the woods. Letters, photographs, trinkets. It was all there, carefully preserved as if Harold had known this day would come. Emma picked up one of the letters addressed to her, running her fingers over the wax seal before setting it aside. She couldn't bring herself to open it yet, not until she understood the significance of the key. "Let's figure out where this goes first," she said firmly, holding up the mysterious object for emphasis. "Grandpa wouldn't give us something without a purpose." The search began in earnest. They started in the living room, checking every drawer, cabinet, and shelf. Jack inspected the fireplace mantel, tapping on the bricks to see if any sounded hollow. Lily rummaged through the sideboard, pulling out dusty photo albums and forgotten knickknacks. Meanwhile, Emma focused on the roll-top desk, a piece of furniture Harold had always kept meticulously organized. At first glance, none of the drawers seemed promising. Most contained pens, paper clips, and other mundane office supplies. But then Emma noticed something unusual: a small, nearly invisible indentation on the underside of the desktop. She pressed it gently, and with a soft click, a hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a tiny lock, perfectly sized for the key in her hand. Her breath caught in her throat. "Guys," she called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "I think I found it." Jack and Lily rushed over, peering over her shoulder as she inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, releasing a satisfying snick. The compartment opened to reveal a beautifully crafted music box, its surface polished to a mirror-like shine. Engraved on the lid in elegant script were the words, "To my dear Emma." Emma's hands trembled as she lifted the music box from its hiding place. It was heavier than she expected, solid and substantial, clearly made with care. She traced the engraving with her fingertips, marveling at the craftsmanship. "This is incredible," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's like he knew exactly what I'd love." "Open it," Lily urged, practically bouncing on her toes. "Come on, we have to see what's inside." Taking a deep breath, Emma carefully lifted the lid. A delicate melody began to play, a tune that was instantly recognizable. It was the same song Harold used to hum while working in his workshop, a cheerful little ditty that always made everyone smile. As the notes filled the room, tears welled up in Emma's eyes. She could almost picture him sitting there, whittling away at a block of wood, humming softly to himself. But the music wasn't the only thing inside the box. Beneath the mechanism was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Emma unfolded it, carefully revealing another handwritten note from Harold. The message was brief but heartfelt. To my dear Emma, never forget that life is full of surprises. Keep exploring, keep creating, and most importantly, keep laughing. Love always, Grandpa. For a moment no one spoke. The room was silent except for the gentle strains of the music box, which continued to play as if Harold himself were standing there, watching over them. Emma read the note aloud, her voice wavering slightly. When she finished, she looked up, at her siblings, her eyes shining with tears. He really thought of everything, didn't he? Jack nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Yeah, he did. That's Grandpa for you. Always leaving us clues, always making sure we remember who he was. Lily sniffled, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her jacket. And look at us. We're doing exactly what he wanted. We're laughing, we're crying, and we're sticking together. He planned this whole thing just to remind us how much we mean to each other. It was true. What had started as a somber day of mourning had transformed into something far greater. An adventure, a celebration, and a testament to Harold's enduring legacy. The treasure hunt hadn't been about material wealth or hidden riches. It had been about connection. Through the map, the chest, and the music box, Harold had given his family one last gift, the chance to come together, to laugh and cry and remember, and to honor the bond they shared. As the music box wound down and the melody faded into silence, Emma closed the lid gently, cradling it in her arms. We should keep going, she said after a pause. There are still letters here, and I'm sure Grandma will want to read hers. Let's make sure everyone gets their piece of Grandpa tonight. With renewed energy, the siblings divided the remaining items from the chest. Each letter was tied with string and sealed with wax, waiting patiently to deliver its message. They decided to take turns reading theirs aloud, sharing Harold's words with one another as they sat around the dining table. One by one, the letters revealed personal messages of love, encouragement, and wisdom. Some were funny, others poignant, but all of them carried the unmistakable warmth of Harold's personality. By the time they reached the final letter, addressed to Grandma Margaret, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The night had passed in a blur of laughter, tears, and storytelling, leaving them exhausted but fulfilled. As they handed the last envelope to their grandmother, who had joined them quietly sometime during the early hours of the morning, they realized something profound. Harold wasn't truly gone. His spirit lived on in the stories they told, the memories they cherished, and the love they shared. And as Grandma Margaret opened her letter and began to read, her voice steady but filled with emotion, the siblings exchanged knowing smiles. This was Harold's greatest gift of all, not the treasures buried in the woods or the secrets hidden in the house, but the reminder that family, above all else, was the most precious legacy anyone could leave behind. The morning light filtered through the curtains of Harold's house, casting golden streaks across the dining table where the family had spent the entire night. The room was quiet now, save for the soft rustle of paper as Grandma Margaret carefully unfolded her letter. Her hands trembled slightly, but her expression remained calm and composed, as though she had been expecting this moment all along. Emma, Jack, and Lily sat around her, their eyes fixed on her face, waiting to hear what Harold had written. Grandma Margaret cleared her throat gently before beginning to read aloud. Her voice was steady, yet there was an undeniable warmth in it, a tone that only someone who had loved deeply and lost profoundly could muster. The letter began with Harold's usual humor. Dear Maggie, if you're reading this, then I've finally managed to pull off my greatest prank yet, leaving behind a mystery for our grandkids to solve. A small chuckle escaped her lips, and the tension in the room eased just a little. As she continued reading, the letter revealed more than jokes. It was filled with gratitude, love, and reflections on their life together. Harold wrote about the early days of their marriage, the challenges they faced raising their children, and the joy of watching their grandchildren grow up. He reminisced about quiet evenings spent sitting by the fire, listening to records, and dreaming about the future. But what struck everyone most was how personal the letter felt, not just for Grandma Margaret but for the entire family. Toward the end, Harold turned his attention to practical matters. He mentioned specific hopes he had for each family member, offering advice tailored to their personalities and dreams. For Emma, he encouraged her to embrace her creativity and never shy away from taking risks. To Jack, he urged patience and perseverance, reminding him that success often came to those willing to work hard even when things seemed impossible. And for Lily, he emphasized kindness and curiosity, urging her to always seek out beauty in the world. But the final lines of the letter were what truly took everyone's breath away. Harold concluded with these words, "Maggie, I know you'll take care of them and they'll take care of you. That's the way it should be. Promise me one thing. Don't let them forget how much fun we had as a family. Keep laughing, keep telling stories, and above all, keep loving each other fiercely. Because at the end of the day, that's what makes life worth living." When Grandma Margaret finished reading, she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she smiled softly, as though carrying the weight of both sorrow and gratitude. "Your grandfather," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "was a man who believed in the power of love and laughter. Even now he's teaching us how to live." The siblings sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the depth of Harold's words. It wasn't just a letter. It was a roadmap for how they should move forward without him. In a way, it felt like he was still guiding them, nudging them toward the lives he knew they were capable of living. Emma glanced down at the music box resting in front of her. Its melody had faded hours ago, but the memory of its tune lingered in her mind. She picked it up gently, examining it once more. There was something comforting about holding something Harold had made with his own hands, something that carried his spirit so tangibly. "Do you think he planned this whole thing?" she asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. "I mean, not just the treasure hunt, but everything. The coffin carvings, the chest, the letters. Did he know?" Jack leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "It's hard to say for sure, but knowing Grandpa, yeah, I think he did. He always had a knack for planning ahead. Remember the time he built that treehouse and acted like it was a surprise? Turns out he'd been working on it for months." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "And remember the birthday parties? He'd spend weeks setting up scavenger hunts or building props for games. He loved giving people experiences, not just presents." Emma smiled faintly, realizing how true that was. Harold hadn't left behind material wealth. He'd created moments. From the intricate carvings in his coffin to the map leading them into the woods, every detail had been designed to bring the family closer together. Even now, as they sat around the table sharing stories and reflecting on his life, they were doing exactly what he intended, celebrating his legacy while strengthening their bond. Their conversation drifted naturally toward memories of Harold, his quirks, his wisdom, and the countless ways he had touched their lives. They laughed about the time he tried, and failed, to teach Jack how to whistle using a blade of grass. They reminisced about the summers spent fishing at the lake, where Harold would insist on catching the big one, despite rarely reeling in anything larger than a minnow. And they remembered the endless supply of cookies he kept stashed in the pantry, claiming they were for guests but secretly doling them out to his grandchildren whenever no one was looking. As the morning wore on, the mood shifted from somber reflection to joyful celebration. It was as if Harold himself were in the room, filling it with his infectious laughter and boundless energy. By the time lunch rolled around, the siblings decided to honor his memory in the best way they knew how, by cooking one of his favorite meals together. They raided the kitchen, pulling out ingredients for Harold's signature dish, a hearty beef stew served with crusty bread. As they chopped vegetables, stirred pots, and set the table, the house came alive with chatter and laughter. Even Grandma Margaret joined in, rolling up her sleeves to knead dough for homemade biscuits. For the first time in days, the heaviness of grief lifted, replaced by the warmth of shared purpose and togetherness. By mid-afternoon, the stew was ready, and the family gathered around the table once more. The meal was simple, but delicious, just the way Harold liked it. Between bites, they continued swapping stories, each anecdote sparking another round of laughter or tears. At one point, Jack pulled out his phone and started scrolling through old photos, showing everyone pictures of Harold at various family gatherings. Some were candid shots of him mid-laugh, others posed portraits where he struck silly poses for the camera. Seeing his face again, frozen in moments of pure happiness, brought a fresh wave of bittersweet emotion. After lunch, Emma suggested they go through the photographs and trinkets from the chest one last time. Spreading them out on the coffee table, they examined each item closely, piecing together fragments of Harold's life. There were black and white snapshots of him as a young man, standing proudly beside the first car he ever owned. There were faded Polaroids of family vacations, Christmas, mornings, and backyard barbecues. And then there were the trinkets, small, seemingly insignificant objects that held immense sentimental value. A pocket watch he used to carry, a pair of gardening gloves worn thin from years of use, and a tiny wooden bird he had carved during Emma's childhood. As they sorted through the treasures, Emma noticed something she hadn't seen before, tucked beneath a stack of photos. It was a small notebook, its cover worn and stained with age. Curious, she opened it to find page after page of handwritten notes, sketches, and doodles. Some pages contained lists of ideas for projects he wanted to tackle. Others featured detailed drawings of woodworking designs. But interspersed throughout were snippets of poetry, quotes, and musings about life. One passage stood out in particular. Life is a series of moments, strung together like beads on a necklace. Some are shiny and bright, others dull and ordinary. But every single one matters, because without them, the necklace wouldn't exist. So cherish each bead, no matter how small or imperfect, for they are what make the whole beautiful. Emma read the passage aloud, her voice trembling slightly. When she finished, the room fell silent. No one needed to say anything. The words spoke for themselves. Harold hadn't just lived a good life, he had understood it. He had embraced every moment, every challenge, every triumph, and woven them into a tapestry of love and meaning. By the time evening approached, the siblings realized they had spent nearly 24 hours immersed in Harold's world. Though physically exhausted, they felt lighter somehow, as if the weight of their grief had been tempered by the joy of rediscovering who Harold was and what he represented. As they prepared to leave the house, gathering their belongings and saying goodbye to Grandma Margaret, they made a silent promise to each other. They would continue honoring Harold's legacy by living the kind of lives he had envisioned for them. Before heading home, Emma paused at the doorway, clutching the music box tightly. She turned back to look at the house one last time, imagining Harold sitting in his workshop, humming that familiar tune. A smile spread across her face as she whispered under her breath, "Thanks, Grandpa. You really did give us the greatest gift of all." As the days turned into weeks, the impact of Harold's final gift continued to ripple through the family. The music box, the letters, the photographs, and even the map itself became cherished relics, each carrying a piece of his spirit. Emma placed the music box on her bedside table, where its gentle melody played every night before she went to sleep. It wasn't just a reminder of her grandfather, it was a symbol of his enduring presence in her life. Jack kept one of Harold's woodworking sketches pinned to his office wall, using it as inspiration whenever he felt stuck or overwhelmed. And Lily carried the tiny wooden bird Harold had carved in her backpack, holding it close whenever she needed courage or comfort. But Harold's influence extended far beyond material objects. His words echoed in their minds during moments of doubt or challenge. When Emma faced a tough decision at work, she remembered his advice to take risks and trust her instincts. When Jack struggled with a project that seemed impossible to finish, he recalled Harold's insistence on perseverance and hard work. And when Lily found herself feeling shy or unsure in social situations, she thought about his encouragement to seek out beauty and kindness in the world. In subtle yet profound ways, Harold's legacy shaped their choices, their attitudes, and their lives. The family also made a conscious effort to honor Harold by embracing the values he held dear: connection, laughter, and love. They began hosting regular gatherings at his house, turning it into a hub of activity and warmth. These weren't formal events, just simple evenings spent sharing meals, playing board games, and telling stories. Sometimes Grandma Margaret would join them, adding her own memories of Harold to the mix. Other times, friends and neighbors would drop by, eager to share their own tales of how Harold had touched their lives. Slowly but surely, the house transformed from a place of mourning into a space of celebration, a living tribute to the man who had brought so many people together. One weekend, the siblings decided to tackle a project they had been putting off for years: cleaning out Harold's workshop. It was a daunting task. The room was filled with tools, half-finished projects, stacks of wood, and countless jars of nails and screws. But as they sorted through everything, they discovered treasures hidden in plain sight. There were unfinished carvings tucked away. In corners, notes scribbled on scraps of paper detailing ideas Harold never got around to completing, and even a dusty old radio he used to tinker with late at night. Each discovery felt like finding another piece of a puzzle, helping them understand not just what Harold did, but who he was. Among the clutter, they stumbled upon something unexpected: a small wooden plaque hanging above his workbench. It was engraved with a single phrase: "Life is better when you create." The words resonated deeply with all three of them. For Harold, creating wasn't just about making things. It was about bringing joy, solving problems, and leaving a mark on the world. Inspired by this realization, they decided to channel their grief into creativity. Emma started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. Jack built a treehouse for his kids, drawing inspiration from Harold's original design. And Lily wrote a short story about a magical forest, weaving in elements of the treasure hunt they had experienced. Their efforts didn't go unnoticed. Friends and family marveled at how the siblings seemed to be thriving despite their loss. What had once felt like an insurmountable void was now filled with purpose and meaning. Even Grandma Margaret noticed the change. "Harold would be proud of you," she said one evening as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. Her voice was soft but filled with conviction. "He always believed in the power of love and laughter. And look at what you've done. You've turned sadness into something beautiful." As autumn gave way to winter, the family prepared for their first holiday season without Harold. At first, the idea felt overwhelming. How could they celebrate without the man who had always been the heart of their traditions? But then Emma had an idea. Instead of focusing on what they had lost, they would focus on what they still had: their bond with each other and the lessons Harold had taught them. They decided to create new traditions, ones that reflected both their past and their future. On Christmas Eve, they gathered at Harold's house once more, this time lighting candles in his memory. Each person shared a favorite memory of him, followed by something they hoped to carry forward in the coming year. Emma talked about how Harold's creativity inspired her to pursue her passions fearlessly. Jack spoke about learning patience and resilience from his grandfather's example. And Lily shared how Harold's kindness reminded her to always see the good in others. By the end of the evening, the room was filled with laughter, tears, and a renewed sense of gratitude. In the months that followed, the family continued to grow closer, united by their shared experiences and memories of Harold. They visited his grave regularly, leaving small tokens of affection: a flower, a note, or a trinket they thought he'd appreciate. On one such visit, Emma noticed something new etched into the headstone: a small carving of a star, identical to the one Harold used to stamp his letters. She smiled, realizing it must have been Grandma Margaret's doing. It was a fitting addition, a reminder that Harold's light still shone brightly in their lives. Looking back, none of them could deny that losing Harold had been devastating. But they also couldn't deny that his death had brought them closer, together than ever before. Through the treasure hunt, the letters, and the countless moments of reflection, they had rediscovered the importance of family, love, and living fully. Harold may have been gone, but his spirit remained alive in everything they did, in the laughter they shared, the stories they told, and the love they gave freely to one another. And so, life moved forward, not in spite of Harold's absence, but because of the foundation he had laid. His legacy wasn't confined to a single day or event. It was woven into the fabric of their everyday lives. Whether it was Emma humming the tune from the music box while painting, Jack teaching his son how to whittle wood, or Lily writing stories, inspired by Harold's adventures, they carried him with them wherever they went. One crisp spring morning, as Emma stood in her garden planting flowers, she paused to glance at the horizon. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the landscape. For a moment she imagined Harold standing beside her, smiling that familiar smile of his. "You're doing great, kiddo," he seemed to say. "Keep going." With a deep breath, Emma returned to her task, her hands steady and her heart full. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew they would face it together, as a family. Because that's what Harold had taught them. Life is better when you create, connect, and cherish every moment. And though he was no longer physically present, his wisdom, humor, and boundless love would guide them forever. As the seasons changed and years passed, the family continued to honor Harold's memory in their own unique ways. But one thing remained constant: their belief in the power of love, laughter, and togetherness. After all, those were the true treasures Harold had left behind, the kind that couldn't be buried in a chest or locked in a drawer. They were the intangible gifts that would endure long after the last note of the music box faded into silence.